Hello, this is episode 8 of the Lord Nailith, that's right. A show devoted to taking away misconceptions of popular topics that a lot of people have trouble with. And so today, episode 8 is entitled The Den of the Damned, that's right. The Den of the Damned. Just to give you an idea how bad the Den of the Damned can be. You know, it's the case that Jesus himself says, "You brood of vipers," in reference to the religious leaders of his day. And quite frankly, it is the case that you may see the very same trends today. You may see them not only in religious institutions, but institutions that are, quite frankly, not religious institutions. You see this kind of activity everywhere. And so I'd like to thank you for watching, but please do continue because it is going to be good. That's right. One of the things that we see in a Den of the Damned is we see this activity that I'll just call the dead tree. That's right. See this activity where people aren't being fruitful, or if they are being fruitful physically, they're not being fruitful spiritually. You see the case where people, quite frankly, not only don't care about each other, but they may even hate each other. They may despise each other. They may seek out revenge toward each other. And, you see this kind of activity, especially where people don't develop their talents, where people could care less about doing whatever it is they do, where people, quite frankly, don't want to be where they're at. And they simply are there to, let's say, make money, or they're there for some other purpose. And the evil that these people fight often becomes a evil that occurs because, quite frankly, they're not fruitful. They don't realize the harm that they do to others. And so, just to give you an example, you see a lot of little kids in a very small schoolroom or something like that, and they all kind of nail each other, and the noise gets louder and louder and louder, and they all just kind of go at it, and then the teacher goes at it with them and causes even more problems. Well, when you see that kind of activity, what a lot of times it is that those kids, they don't want to be there. And they're there, and because they're there, it's hard for them to have a desire towards spiritual fruit, kindness, self-control, gentleness, patience even. I mean, it's hard for them to have that kind of those kind of spiritual fruits because they have to be obedient to somebody. They're not able to serve their own pleasures. And then when those people go home, let's say, and serve their own pleasures, then they might be a little bit more fruitful, perhaps, but quite frankly, that may not be entirely true either, because when they serve those pleasures, whether it be playing video games or whether it be surfing the web or whatever the case may be, if those pleasures are not things that serve Christ, then those people indeed get further and further into worshiping a false god, which is very sad. They start going down this road, so to speak, into into practicing things that, quite frankly, bring them these pleasures when it doesn't really bring them an ultimate satisfaction like they would have if they worshiped the Lord instead. And so you get this kind of problem not just with little kids. You see it a lot with little kids, but you get it a lot too with adults. And ideally, what would be best is if people took those things that God gave them as gifts, those talents, and invested those constantly into one another. Invested those talents in ways that were most fruitful. You know, like if little kids could use their strength and their power when they're children to do constructive things and could learn at the same time, such that they're not, so to speak, in this chair where they have to sit and do things they would rather not do. They would rather not do those things, quite frankly, because they're not designed to be doing those things at an early age. That's right. So when you find little kids reading English textbooks that are for college students, English grammar textbooks, which they often do it nowadays at the age of, I don't know, 6 or 7, 3rd grade, then that's going to be a real challenge for them. It's not only going to be a challenge, but it's going to be a challenge that's going to cause a lot of pain. They'll want to strike out. Now, obviously, it is the case that I would like to see little kids with very good grammar skills. But once those kids learn that college level English and they go out into the world as little children, they won't be using those college level English skills. In fact, they might even be using the F word. And so it doesn't really help them as much as what those educators would think, perhaps, that are having these little kids learn college level English skills. Maybe later on in their lives they might benefit from college level English skills, but by then perhaps they would have forgotten. Some would argue at least they got a basis in having these skills that maybe later they'll go on and do something with their lives. Well, we really don't know. But the fact of the matter is, that's the kind of thing that you can encounter. Now, when you look at employment situations, when you look at places that hire really cheap labor, a lot of times you'll see the same kind of activity where these people are just sort of in a continuation of high school or elementary school, in their minds at least. They believe that they're there because they're just continuing on with what they had as a child. And when this kind of activity occurs, you see the same kind of attitudes being continued forward. You see the same kind of behaviors, but in a completely different way. There you see this idea that the world is indeed a very perhaps bad place, for them at least, and they're there to do whatever it is they do to make however much money they make, so that they could go home from there and survive. That's kind of the thrive. The thrust is to survive. And so when they get into that mode, they don't produce often the fruit, the spiritual fruit that you would like to see, or let's say they do, but in negative ways. And it gets to be the point where instead of producing the things that make humanity great. Instead, they make humanity worse. They actually get in the situation where it's kind of like a zombie or a robot, or somebody that doesn't really have anything going for them, and it basically brings down society in general to have those kind of people. Where they're just like machines, and then a lot of times they have the morality of a machine almost. And when that happens, you see this kind of activity where what they'll do is they'll have sexual relations with just about anybody. They will, they'll basically have terrible home lives, sometimes even filled with violence. And if they don't have terrible home lives, they get into the situation sometimes where they'll have multiple partners, for sex relations over their lifetimes, never have a steady marriage, and basically maybe not even have any children, because they might even have multiple abortions and things of that nature. Sort of like a super demoralized form of humanity. Now, quite the opposite of that is when you see people that are very wealthy because they've invested their talents, and they love each other, they love their children, and they're married for life, and they have plenty of wealth because they've never had these kind of issues in their lives, like I just mentioned with the example of people that are like zombies. And so they're able to have creative ideas, and those creative ideas are able to go out and spawn good things that people want, things that benefit society. And they're able to thrive in the arts, and they're able to thrive in music, and they're able to thrive in humanities. And when you see those kind of people, it may make the people that are zombies very jealous. It may make them say, oh, look, here are these people that have all these good things in their lives, and they, whereas I, the zombie, or I, the robot, do not have any of these things. Well, quite frankly, those zombies or robots, they could have all those same things if they invested their talents. If they had found that through doing those things that God has prepared them to do, gifted them to do, that they are actually giving praise to God. If they had done that, then they would have received the benefit, quite frankly, often, of the arts, would have received the benefit of wealth, and they would have received the benefit of good families, especially if they went to church, where you get a whole lot of other people that are investing their talents in a similar way, that invest those talents into one another.